Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited about today's webinar as we cover a much needed topic, guarding your business, how to protect your business and bank accounts in the digital age. I'm Olivia Rios, Director of Operations and Programs at the Ali Latino Chamber, and our partners at Umpqua Bank will share pertinent information on this important topic. We will hear from experts at Umpqua Bank who will touch upon the different ways criminals will try to defraud your business. You'll learn tips on how to protect your assets and maintain customer trust, adapt to the evolving digital world, and hear real-life examples and stories of incidences. So our moderator, Jonathan Hernandez, Vice President Relationship Manager, will introduce the panel shortly. Combined, they have over 50 years of commercial banking experience. Informational session will have a Q&A at the end, and if you can just jot down your questions in the chat box, that would be great, and our team will respond to them accordingly. So welcome, Jonathan and the Umpqua team.
Perfect. Thank you, Olivia. Good morning, LA Latino Chamber members and guests joining the webinar today. As you know, and as Olivia kind of introed, we'll be talking about fraud protection, cybersecurity, and how you can protect your business accounts in today's digital age. So really important information as cyber fraud has drastically increased. And so we'll teach you how you can protect yourself. Today, we are Umpqua Bank, a 70 billion asset bank servicing the 8 Western states. We had some exciting news last week that we acquired a smaller bank here in Southern California called Pacific Premier Bank. This expands our footprint and growth strategy here in Southern California, bringing about 45 plus branches to the market. Previously, we only had 3, really servicing our business banks, our businesses as a business bank, with having more things online, but now we will have that retail branch presence with this acquisition. We're a full service bank providing financial services and solutions to private companies of all sizes, their owners, and their employees. The information you'll hear today isn't just unique to Umpqua. Most banks will have it, but if they're not having these conversations with you as they should be, we'd be happy to. And again, we're going to throw a lot of information at you, but the one thing I will say to take from it all is just know you have your partners here who to call, and we're happy to go through this and have those one-on-one conversations and answer things that may be a little bit more direct to you and your business. On today's call, you have a lot of banking experience and expertise, and starting with Brian Kindred, he is our Chief Information Security Officer, where he manages the bank's information security program, ensuring the defense of sensitive data and systems. Armed with extensive cybersecurity expertise, his role is pivotal in shielding the bank from emerging cyber threats. Also, you have John Stockton, Senior Vice President, Fraud Director, overseeing the enterprise-wide fraud program for Umpqua Bank. John has 27 years of banking experience, primarily in deposit operations, online banking, treasury management, deposit compliance, anti-money laundering, fraud, information security, and business continuity. Next, you have Tuet Gerald, who has 2+ decades in banking and is currently our lead senior treasury management consulting, running all of California. Tuet crafts tailored solutions, introduces innovative efficiencies, strengthening your operation and financial performance for the companies she serves. Then internally, lastly, you have myself, Jonathan Hernandez, VP Middle Market Relationship Manager, specializing in financing solutions and enhancing working capital access for private companies. And we have a guest speaker, a treat, Donna Maddox, our partner at Constangi, and she is in the Portland office, specializing in data security incidents, regulatory compliance, external communications. She has a background as a federal prosecutor and assistant attorney general, and she currently shares the role of president at the Financial Crimes and Digital Evidence Foundation. So Donna, thank you so much for joining, and really looking forward to hearing some of your stories that you're going to share with us. I will now turn it over to the experts on the call. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat, as I will be monitoring, as well as we'll have time at the end, about 15 minutes for Q&A.
Jonathan, yeah, there you go. Well, first of all, I'm Brian Kindred. Thanks for inviting all of us to speak to you today. And I'm excited to share some of the topics that we're going to talk about. So 2 major themes. We've got our fraud themes, but also the cybersecurity themes that also relate in fraud. So there's a really close correlation between the two. So we're happy today to discuss check fraud, ACH fraud, some emerging threats related to fraud, but also what are some of the specific cybersecurity events that get us to that point of fraud. So we'll talk about social engineering, some of the changes are emerging kind of items there, business email compromise, which is a very difficult item to catch. And then we'll get into invoice scams, wire scams. And then ultimately, we'll talk a little bit about the ransomware sort of themes, what we're seeing from a trend perspective, but also ransomware tends to be that kind of ultimate sort of fraud sort of threat that we all face, and something that we want to really kind of take carefully and make sure we prevent ourselves from that occurring. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to John. We'll touch base on check fraud, and then we'll jump into the other portions of the cybersecurity events.
Awesome. Yeah, one more slide there, Jonathan. And what's old is new again, right? So checks were going to go away, we all said, and they still haven't. And we're issuing them at still higher rates. It still has a B behind it, so it's about 40 billion checks are issued annually, according to the last ABA survey. But let's just get through some vernacular in terms of what can happen with regards to check fraud. So you first have checks that are stolen out of your business, out of your vehicle. Please don't keep your checks in your vehicle. But if you do, they are subject to being stolen. Then the person that steals those can simply forge a signature on those. Believe it or not, we do not compare every signature to yours when these checks are clearing because of the volume. That's one avenue that they could do this. The next two are usually the result of also stolen mail, or stolen checks rather, typically from the mail, whether it be the Postal Service, in terms of the blue boxes that you dump them in, your personal mailbox, your business mailbox, the USPS postal workers themselves, or at the other side, stolen from the business where it was destined for. So you have alterations where they change the payee from payable to Cisco Foods, for instance, to payable to John Stockton, and then John Stockton goes and negotiates that item. Then you have counterfeit items where they take that check, use different technology. They can use Photoshop and place it on a check stock that they have purchased at a local merchant, and then negotiate that item later. And then lastly, forged endorsement, where simply, again, it's payable to Cisco Foods, and it still maintains that way on the check, but they actually endorse it as John Stockton and then put it into John Stockton's account. One thing I want to point out on this screen, though, there are 3 asterisks, and those are on the top 3. And all 3 of those are defended against with what is called payee positive pay, or just positive pay services that Tuet will get to in a bit. So just park that in the back of your brain as something we'll talk about in a bit. Next slide. So in 2023, FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, let all financial institutions know that there is a nationwide threat against mail being stolen from those different areas that I mentioned. Here on the screen, we're showing you a key, a skeleton key that is for sale, in this case in Maryland, being sold on the dark web, where that key would open all of the blue reciprocal mailboxes in the entire county, in this case of Baltimore. These are relatively cheap. What the bad guys are looking to do is steal the mail. And over in the right-hand corner, you see a picture of some of that mail that was stolen. And then they comb through it looking for checks, something that they can get profit from. Again, they would then take those checks down in the right-hand corner of the screen, sell them on the dark web, for someone to alter the check, create a counterfeit, or do something equivalently bad with that check. You'll notice that is a marketplace on the dark web. They even will give you a 10% discount if you give them a good review. It's absolutely insane what is occurring out there on the dark web. It is very profitable, and the volume is absolutely alarming. Go on to the next slide. So on the left-hand side, what we're showing here is how they used to steal checks. So you have a sticky trap that they would stick on a fishing line or just any type of line into the blue mailbox, and then fish out checks one at a time. With that key no longer needed, I can open the door to that and get all of the contents out. Or the picture of the mail truck, and there's a mail carrier there. That's actually somebody being held up at gunpoint. And so they're going to take the mail carrier's satchel, or all of the contents from the truck, and make off with the checks that they're seeking. In the middle is just some different dark web messages about what to do with the stolen checks once received. And then on the far right, recruitment. And we can paste anybody's logo there where it says United States Postal Service. So in this case, it's on the dark web where they're saying, if you work at the post office, I want to talk to you so I can get some of that mail from you. But think about it. This could also be your organization and people enticing your employees to sell information from your organization, check stock, account information, etc. Same could be applicable to where your merchants or your vendors, where you're writing this check to. They could entice them as well to provide that same information once it gets to the destination, if it actually reaches it. We'll go on to the next slide here. To Wet, you are up.
Yes. So now that you've seen checks are maybe not the best way to send payments, but they are still a piece of how we do everyday business, how can you protect yourself? One of the easiest things to do is you can reach out to your bank to add what's called positive pay. The way this works, you'll use your accounting system or how you write checks. You'll upload a file. That file will include the check number, the check amount, the payee name. If all of those things match when the bank receives a check, it's auto approved. If somebody tries to wash your check and change that information, then you will get it on the unmatched list. You'll get a notification to either approve or decline that check that's come in. If you happen to do nothing, most banks will auto decline this as based on fraud. So this is a great way to make sure those checks coming in are actually checks that you've written. Most banks will allow you to upload a file. That way you can just submit all of them at one time. So you're just uploading your check registry. But maybe you're just writing one or two checks. Your bank should also allow you to do a template format. And that's where you just go and type it in. It can also be protected. So this is a basic check positive pay works. Next slide.
Awesome. So think about whenever and we'll use the Cisco reference again, you issue the check to Cisco and it gets stolen in the mail and never makes it to the destination. Cisco calls you and says, hey, I never got that check. You have an outstanding invoice, what have you. So then you look at your statements and see, oh, actually, somebody changed that to John Stockton. Cisco still has monies due to them. And your bank is not going to reimburse you immediately on those types of situations. So you're out that money while your bank investigates the situations and looks to reimburse you. So there's a lot of impact to you in the check fraud situation. That's why that positive pay, which most of the financial institutions offer that service, is so very important. So how can you protect yourself? Where you can and when you can, just reduce your check volume overall. There are a number of different alternative payment methods that you can choose today. Real-time payments is the latest and greatest and moves money immediately. There's still ACH origination, wire transfers, bill payment is another option, and then commercial cards. And Tuet, if you have anything to say about that, just let me know there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say commercial cards are probably my favorite. Definitely talk to your banker, Jonathan, myself. There's so many ways to automate your payables that do not include checks. So we're here to help.
But for those instances in which you do have to issue a check, and there certainly could be those scenarios, knowledge is power. So monitoring your accounts as often as you can. I would prefer daily. Positive pay takes the ease out of that review for you because it does the automation, actually reads the check like Tuet says and tells you when there's not a match. And then lastly, know your insurance. So if you do have insurance coverage, know what coverage it or what it does cover. And more importantly to me, know what it does not cover so that when you are in a situation, you're not left guessing or with some bad news at the end of the day that it doesn't quite cover what you thought it did. On to the next one. So ACH fraud is very similar. ACH is just simply the automated clearinghouse, a very ambiguous term, but it simply means those electronic transactions that occur on your account. So the easiest explanation is a direct deposit. So if your funds come into your account electronically today, that is an ACH. What the bad guys can do, and in the left-hand side of the screen is an example of that. This is just something taken off the web. I believe it was the Hawaii Electric Company or something along those lines, where you can see the limited information that is required to create an ACH debit against an account. If I hand my check to anybody on this panel or anybody in the audience, you will then have all the information you need to complete the form on the left. You have my routing number and account number. And then that debit can be originated against your account. There is nothing that would prevent an ACH debit from posting to an account with a name of John Stockton when the entity name is something very different than that. Again, there's nothing that requires that those be matching. So reviewing your account is ultimately very important. As a consumer, all of us are protected from regulations as long as you tell your bank timely. You will get reimbursed for that erroneous or unauthorized debit. As a business, not so lucky. There are transactions that are called a cash concentration and disbursement, another ambiguous name that Nacha gave. So that's that CCD on the far hand right. If those debits hit your account, you only have 24 hours to tell your financial institution about those in order to get your funds back. If it is greater than 24 hours, unfortunately, you will incur that transaction and that loss. So reviewing your accounts is ultimately very important. On to the next slide, and I think Tuet has some better news for you.
Yes. So as John mentioned, if you're a business owner, that 24-hour timeline, it can fly by. And so how do you protect yourself? It's with ACH positive pay. What I love about this one is, well, checks you need to enter in every time you write checks. ACH is more of a one and done kind of situation. So anybody you've given authorization, think your electric bill, your telephone bill, this is where you've gone on to their website, you've entered in your routing number and account number. You would simply give your bank that information. There is a unique code. So think like T-Mobile. They have a unique code that your bank can help you with. You enter that information into your online banking, and the bank keeps a record of, here are the approved companies that are able to withdraw from this business account. Let's say you change insurance companies and you forget to tell your bank, that will hit the list and go, hey, did you change accounts? Did you change insurance companies? Again, you'll get an alert and be able to approve or decline that ACH coming out. Out of all the fraud protection that you can have, ACH fraud protection is probably the number one I advocate for. Just because John mentioned you've got 24 hours, which we're all busy business owners, it can fly by. So having ACH positive pay to make sure only transactions that you've pre-authorized can pull out of your account actually take place. So if you have any questions on this, we're happy to answer those for you as well.
Awesome. So very similar safeguards here. Knowledge again is power. So monitoring your accounts daily to catch those 24-hour timelines. Again, as Tuet mentioned, the positive pay service does it all for you. So very simple, set it and forget it type thing. Not quite forget it, but set it anyway. And then lastly, informing your bank whenever there is unauthorized activity, whether it be checks, ACHs, or any type of transaction, is very important, that timeliness aspect of it.
I want to highlight, so for the next section, we're going to talk about kind of two major threats that relate to fraud. First, social engineering and business email compromise. So we'll go into those. But first, I do want to highlight on the bottom left, zero-day vulnerabilities, ransomware, supply chain attacks, and insider threats. These are all top of mind for all of us in the industry. These are not the only tactics and techniques that are used by threat actors. So I just want to point that out. But on the slide here, these are the top 6 that seem to be emerging, continuing to change consistently in terms of the techniques that are used. So first, we'll jump into social engineering. If you want to shift to the next slide or change to the next slide, just to talk about this a little bit. So first off, I want to get into an example, and this is where John's going to help me out, from a romance scam and a crypto investment scam that relate to fraud directly. So John, any insights you want to provide here?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the far left there, this is a very common tactic that the fraudsters use for a scam called pig butchering. I didn't name it. That's an FBI they named it. And the idea there is it's kind of grotesque, and sorry about that, but it's the idea of fattening up a pig prior to slaughter. So you're fattening up an account prior to going in and scooping out the funds. So the far left there is just an innocent text, intentional, but seems like it's a random text from somebody just to get someone's attention. And while most people will just ignore it, there are many humans that are just ultra nice and will say, hey, sorry, wrong number, wrong person, wrong something, have a good day. And hopefully that person goes away in most instances. These people will not. They will strike up a conversation with you and they will keep an ongoing relationship with you. Sometimes it's a romantic one. Sometimes it's just a, hey, you know what? Continue the conversation with, how's the weather there? What are you doing today? And then one conversation after another until there's a little bit of trust. And then they'll present an investment opportunity to you that they want to key you in on it because now you're such good friends. You'll see that number there in the middle of the screen of what the dollar value of scams related to that this fraud is within the industry. Note that these are the dollar amounts that were reported to the FBI. That doesn't necessarily equate to all of the actual victims that are out there. And then on the far right, you can see how this is increasing very rapidly, actually surpassing the email compromise stuff that we'll talk about here in a bit. That's, and let me go a little bit into the pig butchering because I didn't explain it well enough. So what they will do typically, and there's variations of this, is they'll show you a website that looks like these great return on investment opportunities. The website is created by the bad guys, it's fake. They'll have you invest in a cryptocurrency. They might even let you withdraw some money just to, again, really get that trust going. And then you come back for more because the investment is so profitable. And then getting your money out won't happen. You'll go to get out money and they'll come out with an excuse. I need money for taxes. The website's down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you're left without your investments. But Donna, I know you've seen probably a lot of this type of stuff. Anything else to add there by chance?
Yeah, nothing else additional on that. I mean, you covered it pretty well, John. And for the folks participating, I've been doing essentially incident response for business email compromise and ransomware matters for the last about 4.5 years. But prior to that, I was a fraud prosecutor for about 20 years. Worked a lot of cases where Uncle and John were involved, and so unfortunately, kind of like we were saying with the check fraud. This is not a new concept. There are just new ways of facilitating this, and people just need to be the issue of the text outreach and response to the text is something that a lot of folks have missed and just need to be extra mindful about making sure not just in your business scenario but telling your parents and your friends about these so that people are deleting them when they come in and not interacting.
Yeah, just to add to Don's comment, I can give you a personal story where I realized, whoa, I responded to one of these. And so I happened to be very busy and, and I'm very security conscious, right? I happen to be very, very busy and I get a text that says, where'd you put the dog food? And so I responded, oh, in the pantry. And I thought it was my wife. I didn't look at the number. And then I realized, I said, oh, I never respond to these things. So of course they wanted to continue the conversation. I just blocked them and moved on. But that's just a case of, it's just a perfect example of, you get busy, you respond to something and it happens. So obviously it didn't result in anything for me, but it still confirmed, right, that the number was valid and someone responded to it. So which is also important to them so they can continue to work that angle. So I just thought I'd share that little example, personal example of mine. If you want to flip to the next slide, something else we want to talk about. That
we have just, sorry, quick question in the chat. Tuet talking about ACH positive pay and check positive pay. Diana asked, is that an extra cost? Short answer, yes, but maybe you could talk just quickly.
Yeah, I would just say work with your bank. There's sometimes different packages, different balances that will help offset those fees. And it really just depends on your bank what they personally charge.
Perfect. And then Michelle, we'll get to your question. That's a great one at the end. Save that for the end. And sorry about the interruption, Brian.
No problem at all. So the next, so really, this is just you know, what we were talking about before is really smishing, right? The text messaging sort of kind of get your attention, but we also have phishing, just general phishing, which includes all of these sort of forms. But the general, when you think of phishing, you think of email phishing. So some of the trends that we're seeing is the use of generative AI, artificial intelligence. You know, it used to be that you could pick up these phishing sort of emails pretty easy because the grammar was incorrect and it's very easy to spot sort of URLs. But they are becoming very sophisticated and they're leveraging tons of information to draft these. They're also automating the entire process. So I'll give you an example where if you get a phishing email that takes you to a website that asks you for your credential, if you enter that credential, we're seeing logins on those credentials within 3 to 5 seconds. So the entire process is automated and they're continuing to drive that and actually get faster. So you can think about this, there are also businesses, phishing as a service capabilities that exist. So more and more threat actors are continuing to, start to participate in this. You're seeing an extensive sort of increase related to this. The latest sort of scam that I've seen lately in terms of phishing is calendar invites. So an example would be a calendar invite that gets you onto an invite, then you're talking to some sort of individual that then tries to social engineer you in person relating to other sort of scams. And I love, John, that you put this from a phishing standpoint or just general social engineering standpoint in the upper right-hand corner. This relates to the kind of use of social engineering around trying to capture your information. So think about, and this is still used today, knowledge-based access questions are still used today to verify you when you call into certain organizations, right? They'll say, well, what was this answer that you gave to this question? And I love that John threw this here is when you're on social media, you're interacting on Facebook and you have a post that says, well, what was your first dog or what was your pet's name, first pet's name, things like that. What was your first car in high school? Those are all used to social engineer and potentially answer those knowledge-based access questions. So it's something to be very aware of, and just as you're interacting online, it's something that's leveraged all the time. Donna, anything you want to add to this or anything I didn't cover from a general phishing before we go into smishing and phishing, the other ones?
No, nothing on this. When we talk about business email compromise, I'll talk about this again.
Okay.
I just think it's important to note that phishing attacks and compromise of any email account most often starts with a credential harvesting phishing email, as you said. So, and we're all busy, we're moving quickly, but educating people in your organization that they need to be extra cautious about anything that asks them to put in their credentials, even if it appears to come from a trusted source. Because as I will talk about in a minute, when we talk about business email compromise, oftentimes it is the compromise of a trusted email account that then launches a secondary phishing attack to just kind of continue that circle. So that hypervigilance, unfortunately, is required.
I agree with you. Great point in terms of verifying out of band. Just that verification is really critical when it comes to social engineering and business email compromise. Can you go ahead and flip to the next slide? So I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about smishing. I think I saw a question come through related to kind of bank sort of impersonation that comes through, and this is where John can kind of share some examples. But consumers receive these all the time. Businesses receive these all the time. Us as individuals receive these all the time. So any sort of text message that we talked about that is asking for information, really question that if you don't recognize the number, and even if you do recognize the number and you think it's the bank, make sure you call the bank directly. Use that phone number that's on the back of the card. Call them, verify that. Make sure you're calling the correct number as well. So responding to these sort of messages coming from a bank, it'd be extra leery about that. John, anything you want to share from a smishing standpoint related to this?
Yeah. So in the chat, there's a question there related to what is a very popular trend occurring across the nation, which is bank impersonation, and stick whatever word you want to in front of the impersonation. So it's customer impersonation, bank impersonation, law enforcement impersonation, et cetera, et cetera. So here in the example, which is very common and actually shown here on the screen too, in the two circled visuals there, but it's a number they're purporting to be your financial institution. In the chat example, the codes that were provided. So if we read those messages, and obviously I don't have them, but I am very sure that those codes said something to the effect of, do not share this with anybody. And then it gave you the code. Now, when we are in a hurry and we already have that trust there because I'm talking to my bank, we might overlook those words. So what they were doing there is most likely logging into an online banking for that victim. They needed the multi-factor authentication codes that were then sent to the user and said, go ahead and read those to me. I need them from you. And when they did that, that would then allow them access into the online banking account. I don't know if there was or was not actual transactions that occurred on that, but giving those codes are the equivalent of placing your keys on top of the hood of your car or the trunk, whatever, and then walking away. It's literally giving the bad guys access to that asset, in this case, your account. And because you fell victim, or this person fell victim to that scam, they would likely be responsible for the transactions that occurred thereafter. But some other points here, in the top right-hand corner, it says, again, they're purporting to be coming from your bank, but why would I be going to a website of best stallions in Brazil? So just, kind of slowing down and thinking before you click there. Right?
Yeah, and something else to highlight, John, just, all financial institutions, as we detect these from a fraud standpoint or cybersecurity standpoint, we do have takedown services that we initiate and try to, mitigate the threat from these threat actors in terms of their activities. What they do, though, is they consistently change the phone number, consistently change where they're coming from. So it's a little bit of a cat and mouse game. However, I just want to assure you that we do take action, and we consistently work that angle to try to prevent any of that from taking place. Next slide.
One more thing, and you can go ahead and do the next slide, but one more thing to think about is the direction of the call, because it does matter. And that example in the chat, the bank was calling the customer and then sending them a code to authenticate them. If we call you, I'm intentionally trying to call you. I'm not going to send you a code to then authenticate you. However, if you call us, absolutely, we might send you a code to authenticate you. So just call direction matters. That's all I wanted to point out.
And I was just going to jump in, Brian. I have a lot of small business clients that have fallen victim to bank impersonation scheme just like this. So it does happen pretty frequently. Know that the people who are on the other line, they are professionals. They are very skilled at what they do. They can be very, very convincing. I had one client who even stopped and thought, well, maybe this is a scam, and just Googled the person's name and the bank and came up with a real person at the bank and said, oh, this must be legitimate. Gave the code, did the process. Over the course of 2 days, a lot of money went out of the account. And it was only when that individual, called a separate fraud number at the bank and said, look, I got a call from this individual and this is what they asked me to do, where the bank actually said, that was not us. So independent verification of a known number, just like Brian was saying before, call the number on the back of your card or your bank. They're going to try and create a sense of urgency around you responding. But I always tell folks, you got to take that pause and that breath and go and do that independent verification.
Yeah, this is a perfect example of phishing, voice impersonation, sort of voice social engineering, the phone calls you get. So this is continuing to rise. And one of the trends here that's continuing to increase and very scary is the use of voice cloning in this instance. So let's take, for example, your CEO of your organization or other executives. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner, you can actually clone someone's voice with only 3 seconds of their voice. So just think what that means. So you can get a phone call with somebody's voice being impersonated. You can also get an email with an audio recording. And it's something to be very leery of. And it's there's an example on the next page that we'll go through. I believe it's John had pointed out a great story in terms of Ferrari. It's something that continues to increase. And so not only with phishing, you're also going to see sort of video impersonation that takes place as well, and that's growing. So, and not only with the use of deepfakes, but we're also seeing a trend in terms of help desk impersonations within organizations. So someone calling from the outside, pretending to be your IT help desk, then getting individuals or employees to take action with those computers, to take advantage of them and take control, which then leads to account compromise and all of the other activities that take place. So I wanted to point that out, just something to be very, very aware of. Go to the next slide. And this is where I want to kind of just share. I think I talked a little bit about this before, but it's the deep fake. You can see Obama in the upper left-hand corner there, the artificial on the right, very close. Even when you look at the video between the two, it's very close, very hard to detect. There's subtle nuances to it, but it's still, again, you got to really think about it. When there's someone asking you to take action on something that's urgent, that's a key sign that you need to verify that out of band and really kind of call the individual on the side with a phone call, have some other way, reach out on instant messaging, find some way to go outside that channel that they're reaching out to you on. And you can see the Tom Cruise on the bottom. If you haven't seen some of the Tom Cruise videos, they're very realistic, very impressive. You can see those on YouTube. So the use of this is going to increase. So just be very aware. And there's an interesting story here, I would say on the bottom that John has pointed out regarding Ferrari and just the use of, you know, the social engineering sort of technique. And John, anything you want to share there in terms of that story?
Just the bold part there is really is what stood out to me. So, you know, there was a scenario in which, you know, voice cloning and whatnot was used. But then there was just a simple question of regarding a book that the CEO had recommended that thwarted this whole thing. So it was a verbal conversation that they had had about a book. He brought it up in this conversation during this action that was to be taken on money movement, and the fraudster didn't know the answer to that. So it was very quick to unfold everything. So when you think about, you know, what you might have, you know, with your family, you know, code words or something along those lines, and then apply that to your businesses as well, your business scenarios as well.
Thanks, John. That's great. All right, from a safeguard perspective, I mean, really think about your email detection and prevention controls. There are a lot of technical controls that you can prevent the common sort of email scams, such as spoofing, items like that. Once you get into business email compromise, there are other forms of that Donna alluded to, which we're going to know a little bit here, that are definitely harder to pick up or harder to prevent from an email security standpoint. When it comes to defense, it's always great to not only have just email security controls, but other defense in-depth controls. So think about, as you have links coming in from your email system, having the ability to inspect that link as someone does click on it. It's just one example, you know, to inspect that link to make sure it's not malicious. But ultimately, when you think about some of the other greater defense in depths, I think everyone talks about multi-factor authentication. I think I can't say enough about multi-factor authentication, but that is a key to controlling your accounts and limiting access for others that may capture your credential through a phishing campaign. Awareness and training, really important. So just having the conversation today and sort of sharing what we're seeing is really important to bring that awareness. And I'd highly recommend you just share this video, share this recording with others as you can. And then also, if you ever get a chance, implement phishing sort of training awareness or other security training awareness within your organizations that help others identify and protect your organization. We talked about clicking links. Definitely always go to the site directly if you can. Ignore text messages when you don't recognize those. There are services for your phones that you can install and help you with that. And then always, again, be aware of deep fakes. And again, I can't say this enough, but verify out of band when there's something that's urgent. It's critical. Almost, you know, you need to make sure it's a business process and everybody follows that. So really critical. All right, next slide. Business email compromise. So you can flip to the next. So business email compromise comes in many forms. One, I talked about spoofing. So think about the credit card sort of CEO or gift card sort of CEO scams where they create a domain lookalike where, you know, a new employee comes in, they get this email that comes in and says, hey, the CEO wants, you know, this is the CEO, I want, you know, you to purchase some gift cards, give me the codes. That's a very common tactic, and that's related to spoofing. And there's a lot of controls such as DKIM, DMARC, and SPF. And I know there's a lot of acronyms. Always happy to talk about that more in detail in terms of the technical aspects. Let us know. Always happy to have that conversation. But the one that I think Dawn alluded to before is the one that's really sort of hard to prevent. And this is because it comes from one of your vendors or suppliers or just someone that you're interacting with, not in your business, where their account is taken over. And when they take over that account, they'll use the trusted communication or threads of messages that already exist. So think there's some trust that exists. So when that email comes in from that threat actor that has taken that over to ask for some sort of change in terms of payment or address or phone number, what have you, it's very difficult for an email security system to pick that up and stop that because it's not violating any of the rules typically within an email system. And so, Dawn, I'm gonna pause there.
Yeah, and I'll just talk a little bit about sort of the anatomy and background of how these work and what we see. You know, so again, I 24/7 incident response counsel, typically in response to business email compromise and ransomware attacks, which we're going to talk about as well. I typically get pulled in when a small business, and most of the entities I work with are in fact small to medium-sized businesses, have an incident like a business email compromise or ransomware. They call their cyber insurance carrier. Definitely highly recommend, if you don't have it, that is something you look into and you have that number handy someplace in the event of need. We get pulled in early, get engaged under those policies to bring in forensic investigators, really to see what happened, not just to make sure that you can close any back doors and make sure that the threat actor is out of your system, but to analyze legal obligations, because you can have access to or exfiltration of data, even in a business email compromise, that could lead to legal obligations for the organization. You also really want to understand, what was that threat actor, and that's sort of our term of art, do? What were they doing when they were in the account? As we talked about earlier, these business email compromises often start with an email that comes from a trusted source with a link that says, hey, can you link into this, share file account? Used to be, we saw a lot with DocuSign. We don't see those as much anymore. An email designed to create urgency. I saw one last week, which I thought was really ingenious. It appeared to come from HR and said, your payroll is being reduced, urgent action needed. So that got that person to click on that link and put in their credentials. Multi-factor authentication, always not just enabled, but enforced on all accounts, is very important. But if a person believes they are legitimately signing into a share file account and they expect to get a prompt on MFA, they're going to allow it. And so oftentimes threat actors are getting around MFA in a variety of ways. And once that threat actor is in your account or that compromised account, they can take any action you could take. And it looks legitimate to your system, which is why, as we heard before, it's not being flagged by some of the controls and security monitoring systems you might have on email. Know that the threat actor can look at your emails, can place rules on your email box to maybe prevent you from seeing emails. They can draft emails, send emails, also pivot to share file and see what's in share file. We often see them monetizing this access by trying, as you all know, to jump into and redirect payments, whether those payments are ACH payments, or I've seen it done even with check payments during an email compromise. Some of these threat actors are patient. We have seen circumstances where they are in counts for months, trying to redirect these payments and monetize them before they take their last step, which typically is, once they know that they have utilized the account as much as they can, to launch a phishing campaign from the account. It's the last overt act, typically, of a threat actor in an email account. So the goal really is to make sure you've got the defenses up in the beginning to prevent the threat actor from coming in. As we heard, MFA is really important on all these accounts. Many times these unauthorized actors are logging in from places like Eastern Europe or West Africa. So having geolocation blocking on your email accounts is great. If you don't expect that someone is going to be logging in from Nigeria, which oftentimes these fraud schemes are sourcing from there, you can block those logins. I see those frequently. Also limiting who's got administrator access in your accounts, because if an administrator account is compromised, they can wreak additional havoc in the rest of your environment. I think that's all I have on this slide, Brian.
That was great, Donna. Can you share anything additional you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, what Donna really nailed it on the head. They will spend time in an email account doing reconnaissance, understanding who you talk to, how you talk, who moves money, things of that nature. Because at the end of the day, they're talking about a big payday. I've seen instances of $12 million going out the door in a payment to a vendor where it was actually the fraudster's controlled account. Homeland Security Investigations recently put out a study here last week that I read, in which they said some of the words in the email compromise situations, the most common they saw were payment, urgency, and request. I actually have a differing opinion on that. I'll add one to it that is more frequent, and it's in the example on the far right there. So in the last excerpt of an email, second paragraph, the second sentence, the first word, kindly. Anytime I see that word, I literally cringe because 9 times out of 10, that is a fraudulent email. If you use kindly in your normal emails, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. Simply, it's my experience in reading through a lot of these, what I see. The example here is common, but there are many variations of it. This one here is something that I took from an actual instance that we saw, where the bad guy simply said, hey, I want to talk about my outstanding invoices with you. the customer in that case then said, "Oh, I just wrote the check here. It was about to send it off in the mail today." And they said, "Well, hold on, we don't accept checks anymore." And they came up with an excuse there. "We want you to send that via ACH." And if you would have said, "I can't do ACH," they would have said, "Okay, how about a wire?" They just want the money, any way to get it out of the bank. Donna mentioned it a second ago. Picking up the phone, calling that vendor when there's a change is your best defense, and it will work if you just take that moment. And I think we'll talk about some more of that here on the next slide. Brian, go ahead.
And John, I just want to echo what you said. Kindly, I just don't even I tell people all the time, if you see the word kindly, just stop.
Yes.
Because it's so
Yeah, absolutely.
And always be leery because generative AI, ChatGPT, Copilots, all the others that are out there, they are getting, they're really good. So just a couple things from my standpoint. I think we highlighted quite a few of these, right? The out-of-bound verification, but one that I want to point out that I think is really important to consider is what they call phishing-resistant MFA. Donna talked about multi-factor authentication and how important that is. So things like if you see passkeys are a perfect way to kind of support the phishing-resistant MFA. Nothing is perfect, but it makes it much more difficult for a threat actor to intercept the multi-factor authentication codes in between and relay that to a login. So that's where the technology in terms of cryptography that's being used really inhibits a lot of that from taking place. So if you see on the website the ability to use passkeys with your mobile phone, highly recommend using that. And in terms of that capability, it will prevent a lot of what threat actors can do today. And not to say that wouldn't change, but today it's working very, very well. And I would say, the slowdown in terms of urgent requests. Can't say that enough. Anytime you get some sort of urgent request, phone, email, text, that's always a sign, right, that there's something taking place. The authentication out of band I talked about, education, training, and awareness is super important. And absolutely, I think this is probably most important for fraud in terms of the notification and the timelines around that John talked about that. Reach out as fast as you can to us. We're always happy to help. And sort of start to take action on our end to sort of reduce the loss and hopefully prevent that. So, Donna, John, anything you want to add here that we didn't cover already in terms of?
I think just in action, Donna did cover it before, but your cyber insurance carrier would be super important. That'll then kick off the forensics, the Donamatixes of the world, things of that nature to help. It does take a village to get the money back.
Yeah, and I would also add, no one expects most small and medium-sized businesses to be experts in the things we are talking about here, right? How to configure your email tenant in order to limit the, potential abuses. So this is really a place we're relying on outside experts sometimes, not just in information technology, but in information security, which is a different field than information technology. And really making sure that if you need to bringing, some outside sources to bear to either do a review of your network, maybe perform an audit, give you some tips on how to tighten up your security posture. Great
points. You want to flip to the next slide and we'll wrap this up with ransomware.
Yeah, similar to the insurance that I talked about on check fraud, earlier on in this session, but same thing here. Know what protections your cyber insurance carrier does provide you, and again, most importantly, know what it does not cover. That'll help you with a lot of angst down the road. And Donna mentioned this too. Have that number handy, because when you are in one of these events, say you send out millions of dollars out to a vendor that you thought you were paying and found out that it wasn't them. Those are tense moments. So you'll want to have your ducks in a row so that you can just call your bank, call your cyber insurance provider, call law enforcement. You know what to do, because these are very chaotic moments. And actually, I don't know if you want to talk anything. Number 3 here, dual control is important to me as well. If you have the opportunity to have multiple people in this process, you want to talk to that?
Yeah, again, just working with your bank in their online capabilities for the ability to have, for instance, one person maybe from your accounting team that's uploading those ACHs or wires, and then having a secondary person actually approve them. Again, it just gives us a moment to pause, a moment to go, is this accurate information? Are these people that we're used to dealing with? Again, more eyes on your transactions, and especially those transactions that are almost instant payment like ACH and wires, is going to help protect you. pausing is always a safe way, and having dual eyes is always a safe plan as well.
Yeah. And I think on those dual eyes, make it meaningful, right? So Brian entered the wire. I trust Brian. He's a good guy. But I'm still going to ask Brian, how did you authenticate that request where we're normally paying Cisco at this account number and routing number, but it's changing? Brian, did you pick up the phone and call them and authenticate that? So have those meaningful controls in place, not just Brian entered it, he's a good guy, I'm going to go ahead and approve this wire and send it on down the line.
Absolutely. All great points. Well, let's wrap this up with ransomware, some of the trends that we're seeing. So ransomware, if you're not familiar with it, is and I'm sure most have heard this term, it's I would say the taking data or taking over systems in terms of locking up those systems. So there's kind of two kind of major forms. So all the sort of phishing, social engineering, so some of the tactics that we talked about today, as they get into your systems and start to take that over, one of the forms is, let's go ahead and steal the data. We're going to hold the organization ransom based on the data that we have, and we're going to ask for money in terms of, if we get the money, we'll go ahead and delete the data. We're not going to say anything or post it on the dark web, et cetera. Second form of that is actually taking over systems and actually locking up systems, servers, et cetera. And I'm sure you've heard in the news, right? All the implications that come from that in terms of not being able to run your business, et cetera. So with that, some of the things that we're seeing, and I know Donnie talked about this before, access brokers, there's a large network in the very middle of the screen, very large network, and their sole purpose of threat actors is to go after and capture credentials from organizations, individuals, and then sell that information on the dark web. So they will sell this information, and it's their entire business to sell this information to make money off of this, where then threat actor groups take that information and those credentials and then start to work on moving towards taking over systems and implementing ransomware, et cetera, within that environment to gain monetary value. What we've seen, or what we're seeing as an increase, is as they sell those credentials, we're seeing dual ransom attacks. So you get two threat actor groups that kind of go after the same organization. And we've seen some of these instances in the news where that's starting to take place, and then that results in double extortion. So it's just becoming more and more complicated. And it's not only affecting, I would say, you as an organization, but at the very front of this, we also have our supply chain sort of attacks where they also like to come through. So there's many examples where one of your vendors gets compromised, leads to social engineering through a vendor, then compromise of your organization through the tactics that we talked about today. So those are, I would say, the major trends. And Donna, you deal with this a lot with ransomware and helping organizations. Any thoughts or some of the trends you're seeing as well?
Yeah, the number one sort of different thing that we have seen in the last 6 months, I was just talking to a team about this yesterday, is the dual attack. So two threat actors being in the system at the same time, or you're recovering from one and you have a secondary attack. Before Christmas of this year, I had never seen it. I've seen it 6 times since then. And that's just my cases, right? That's not, in talking to other folks, it's a lot. So, and that presents a very difficult position for organizations, because that means as you're trying to recover, the odds of a secondary attack are pretty high. And again, these can be pretty expensive in terms of dealing with the repercussions. I will also say this, Brian mentioned, some of the ones you've heard about in the news, and you hear about, a Colonial Pipeline and Change Healthcare, you hear about the really big ones. But the reality is these threat actors are opportunistic. It does not matter if you are Change Healthcare. They are just looking for an open door to get in. So I have just as many clients that are small, construction companies, a plumber, a roofer, a dentist, a lot of dentist offices, so small organizations. So no, I hear a lot of small businesses say, I don't think we're not going to be a target for this, but the reality is any organization with a network and a firewall is a target.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So what can we do about it? I want to flip to the next slide. We'll close out with some recommendations here. I would say, John, you mentioned this before, but I don't think you can plan enough or practice enough in terms of just exercising and having all your ducks in a row. The phone numbers to call, what do you do in terms of this instance, et cetera. When it comes to incident response planning, I will have to say, I want to plug cybersecurity insurance again. It's really important that cybersecurity insurance really provides a lot more value in not just the insurance sort of component, but also the insights from what type of plan do you need? They can review the plan. So they become somewhat of a partner in helping you prepare for that. So I can't communicate that enough. But also, when it comes to an incident response plan, take that plan once you have it developed and run tabletop exercises. You don't have to actually run disaster recovery or to really do a true simulation, but just having the conversation with the right folks in the room around, here's the scenario, how would we respond, and who plays what role and responsibility is critical just to get prepared, and then have all those numbers dialed in terms of who you should call when and for what. It's really critical. On the, from a prevention standpoint, I think I got backups at the number one. Backups are so critical, and what they call immutable backups. So having the ability to recover from a backup that can't be modified is critical, but also understanding, this is where you get into some of the forensics from a recovery standpoint, but understanding how far you need to go back from a backup standpoint, and think about how long you store those backups, because it could be that you're backing up information of systems that have some of that compromise that is included in it. So it's something to be aware of. From a prevention standpoint, the first one here, zero trust, it's just a philosophy of you don't trust anyone. But really what I'd like to point out here is zero trust, there's kind of a couple core components to it. Oh, there's quite a few, but the ones that I think are most important is there's a combination of device authentication, which is, passkeys are part of that, plus your user credentials and MFA. Now, what I can't say enough is if you were to give up a credential, and if that credential is tied to a device, it's very difficult for the threat actor to use that externally. They have to actually take over your device and authenticate from your device. So wherever you have the component or the capability to implement device authentication on top of user authentication with MFA, this really helps from a prevention standpoint. So I can't show that enough. Now, from a hygiene standpoint, I'll point out vulnerability management is critical. We all should be doing that, scanning for vulnerabilities and then patching on a regular basis, and then pay attention to zero-day vulnerabilities. Most of the compromises today that take place that are very big, such as MOVEit and others, all start from a zero-day vulnerability. It's the vulnerability where you cannot patch it and it's taken advantage of it. But if you're aware of it, you can start to implement sort of IP blocks, take down systems, things to kind of prevent that from happening to your organization. We haven't talked about, I don't think we've talked about multi-factor authentication enough, but it's something to point out. There are other capabilities out there instead of like, when you think about your general antivirus sort of platforms, the newer capabilities are endpoint detection and response. There are many vendors that do this. This goes beyond the normal sort of signature-based detection. It goes into behavior-based detection, and this is really critical to stop threat actors today. Awareness training, what we're doing today, continue to do that. Share this if you can, and always, if you get the capability, always hire someone to test your systems, or do it internally if you have that capability. Or run penetration tests. Test your systems to see how vulnerable they are. Run a penetration test using social engineering. Go ahead and test, do a physical security assessment and actually see, can you walk in and get into certain rooms and bypass that sort of authentication that maybe staff would do. So all of these this is just the tip of the iceberg, but really, I guess what I'm pointing out here is that defense in depth sort of strategy. Just think about the multiple layers as you go through a security program to try to prevent these things from happening. And I know it's more complex than what we have on the screen, but these are some of the key components. So I'm going to pause there for anyone else that'd like to share any sort of recommendations at the end here for everyone on the line.
I'll just reemphasize awareness training and just socializing this with your family, your friends, your coworkers, anyone and everyone you can. It does work, and when people do see something, it'll pop out at them. A real life example, I talk about this stuff all the time with my wife, for her. But, she was at work, coworker called her, said, I'm at Target trying to get some gift cards. It didn't make sense for my wife because of the industry they're in. Her boss had emailed the associate and said, you should go to Target and get these. I'm hopping on a plane, so you can't call me. So that there's the hook right there. But my wife told her, go home, it's a scam, and lo and behold, it was all a scam. That the fraudster had noticed that the CEO was going on vacation by looking at Facebook. So know that where you post things, people are watching you. And then lastly, in these ransomware situations, just, part of the planning is knowing how you're going to respond to this. Are you going to pay it out? Are you going to not pay it out? What's the impact to you? And just remember, if you do pay it out and the bad guys don't give you your data back, you can't run to your local law enforcement agency and say, hey, I paid these bad guys and they didn't give me my stuff back. You're dealing with criminals there. So, Donna, anything else?
And I would just add, that's kind of the service we provide folks during the incident, right? Is walking you through and saying, is there a reason you have to make a payment? What are the risks of making payments? It depends really on the threat actor you're working with. No one ever wants to make a payment to threat actor, but sometimes it is necessary. So we can walk clients through that sort of analysis. As it pertains to the incident response plan that Brian talked about, again, highly recommended. Just like you would practice a fire drill, you want to practice what would happen in a situation like this, be prepared for it. Our firm also does incident response plans. Obviously, we take all of the intel we've gathered from helping people respond to these particular incidents to prepare for these incidents. We do tabletop exercises, do walk through those. We do have multiple offices in California and would be happy to assist if people were interested in that. I will also note, if you do have cyber insurance, take a look at your policy and see who the panel vendors are. You will have your cyber insurance will have preferred vendors that will have more reasonable rates, both for on the law side and what I'm going to call the ransomware response and forensic investigation side. Because what you don't want to do is panic, as John said, go hire somebody's firm down the street, and then your cyber insurance isn't covering any of that. So you can actually even have advanced calls with some of those providers to again be ready. Where if you have an attack, you have a pre-approved vendor that you can call immediately.
And just wanted to say thank you to all you for speaking today. But I think some of the key things to take away, right? There's things you can do to prevent this with your bank, as we talked about: positive pay, dual verification, dual all authorization as well. And then one of the things as well is, if there's ever a change, somebody's asking you, hey, we've changed our account, or we no longer take check, we want ACH. Anytime that there is a change, it's always best to pick up the phone, call that customer, call that vendor, call your bank with that verified number to ensure that truly is, because a lot of these fraudsters will do tricky things. Instead of an M, they'll use double N, or they'll put a hyphen in between the name so it looks really close to what the email the email that you're used to getting, but it's just slightly verified. Or those links that Brian was talking about, same sort of thing. They'll just hyphen it or put a period in there just so it looks like the link you're used to, but it's slightly off for those fraudsters to benefit. And as Donna's mentioned, it's very hard to get that money back. So there's also the third-party things you can do, like insurance and things like that. But kind of open it up to questions here, the last 5 minutes. And I think one of them we have, apologies, I don't remember if Brian or John, you were talking a bit about it, but the geolock, maybe how do you do that, and how does that work? One of the questions in the chat.
I think the question, let's see, I'll take a step. You're talking about the geolocation sort of restrictions, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, so absolutely. So within your network, you can say you're using, it does say your infrastructure service, or you have your own sort of network. Typically within the firewalls or the security gateways that are external, they have capabilities within those that allow you to block based on geolocation. Some of those are very simple. You select the geolocation. Some of those you can actually go research the IP addresses for those specific areas of the world, and you can put blocks in. So what you can do is just say, well, I want everything blocked but these, and say you can do an allow list that says I want just the United States or Canada, Mexico, or other areas. So something to just consider. It's usually within your firewall capabilities is where you can place those restrictions, and they are beneficial in terms of stopping the traffic from coming from those sort of sources.
Perfect. Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions? You can throw them in the chat or come off mute and ask.
So I do have one quick question. This is Olivia. The ACH positive pay. So do you queue those in advance? Is it a one-time only? Is it for recurring payments to XYZ company? Can you share or elaborate?
Yeah. So I do like to think of it as somewhat a one-time only. So you just have to put that information in one time. So again, my example is like putting in T-Mobile or the electric company or your credit cards. You're just putting their information in one time. The only time you'd need to do it again is if you change insurance companies or if you want to add someone to that list. So you're giving your bank that information. I call it your authorized list. So those are your authorized vendors that are able to pull money from your account electronically.
And thank you for answering the geolock location. I will make sure that our IT person does go into the firewalls, because we're local here in the United States. We may do some business or transactions with Mexico, but that's about it, But I think it's really important for everyone to be aware. As we were on the phone, I got a text from an 858 area code, and they said, "Are you in a better mood today?" And I just smirked because I don't know anyone from the 858 area code, but yeah, I mean, we have to be really vigilant, because that one, period, the one space, the double A in the company name, if you're not really paying attention, it could be very detrimental to your business. And, the only way we could really be safeguarding our companies is by being hyper vigilant on everything we do. The no trust is really true. Don't let your guard down, because you could be your own worst enemy and, just sharing the information. Thank you everyone for your time this morning, and for everyone that is with us. This is the kind of webinar that we need to be really on point and be prepared for these types of incidences. So another key takeaway is looking at your policy for cybersecurity. That's new to me. So how would you recommend that our businesses do that? Would it be a separate policy? Is it integrated to the policies that we currently have? Is there a separate side note that we need to look out for that language?
Yeah, I would jump in and note that you typically have a specific cyber policy, and it can be very varied in terms of what it covers. Talk to your broker that you work with on your other insurance policies. If you don't have cyber insurance, we'll be able to give you some options, kind of run you through again, there are so many options in the landscape. And I find that the brokers are really skilled in helping clients navigate what the best potential options are.
Okay. So those recommendations on the cybersecurity, is that for all, you recommend it for all size businesses? I mean, everyone's is basically online these days.
Yeah, I mean, some of those things don't apply to personal accounts, but yes, we do recommend them across the board.
Wow. That's really key. I love it when I learn something new, right? So,
I would just say fraudsters don't discriminate. They're just looking for a victim. They throw out a very wide net, hoping to catch something. So anybody is absolutely at risk, unfortunately.
okay. Well, I want to thank everyone at Umpqua Bank for participating with us.